the harrowing days of national sorrow reach their peak. After lying in state while 300,000 people filed silently past, the coffin of the king, surmounted by the imperial state crown, the orb and the scepter, is borne out of Westminster Hall. As the bells of Westminster Abbey peal their lament, it is placed on a gun carriage for the funeral procession through London.
Присоединяйся к 9-й годовщине.
Attired in their heavy mourning, the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret enter their carriage, and there begins the sad last journey of King George VI. "16 years ago, he walked behind this same gun carriage with his 3 brothers. The ceremonial in which he took part then is today for him. On foot behind the Queen's carriage walk his 2 surviving brothers, his son-in-law, and the Duke of Kent, his nephew. When his father died, how many of us had any conception what the ensuing 16 years would bring forth? The tumult and perils of another war were hidden in the dark future, the sacrifice in human lives symbolized by the cenotaph. The austerities and stresses of these post-war years were still undreamt of, while, above all, his own destiny as sovereign of this wide and scattered commonwealth of nations had yet to be revealed. Between 1936 and 1952, so much of history has been compressed that an age, rather than 2 short reigns, seems to have rolled away. The retinue of mourners come from all over the world. The President of France, Monsieur Auriol, beside him 3 kings of Denmark, of Greece and Sweden, next the presidents of Yugoslavia and Turkey, with the King of Iraq between them. These heads of state are but a few of the distinguished men and women who have come to pay him the last honors. As the procession winds through London, the solemnity of the occasion is matched by our thoughts. Our emotions, too, are stirred. How could they fail to be? The funeral music, the atmosphere of sorrow, sympathy for the Queen and her bereaved mother and sister, these touch the heart and harrow the thoughts. Royalty is no longer remote. Films and radio now bring kings and queens into our daily lives. We see and recognize their qualities. The public has never been in doubt about the qualities, courageous and faithful, of him who rides here on his last journey. This is the testimony of one witness to his courage.
During these last months, the king walked with death, as if death were a companion, an acquaintance whom he recognized and did not fear. In the end, death came as a friend.
And so, in due time, the coffin arrives at Paddington Station, where London bids farewell to a king.
At Windsor, the arrival of the funeral train has been awaited in somber expectancy. Windsor knows the royal family as no other town knows them. Windsor is their home. Here at the end of their lives, our kings come home to be buried. As the cortege moves out of the station, all eyes turn on that lonely coffin, high and lifted up above its escort. Then to the carriage which follows, to the Queen Mother and to Princess Margaret. This must be the saddest of all their days. The procession moves on towards the home park, which it enters by the Cambridge Gate. Thence up the long walk in stately and solemn array to the sovereign's entrance by the Henry IV Gate. Now it is almost the last scene. On a perfect English winter's day, with the royal standard flying at full mast, the body of King George VI enters the castle grounds, where he will rest with his fathers in St. George's Chapel. He was a good man, has been the ordinary man's simple tribute. Others who had the privilege of knowing him personally speak of his steadfast courage under suffering, his sense of humor, his conscientiousness, his Christianity. All this rings true. Orders to surrounding troops mingle with the footsteps of the gun's crew as the cortege comes to a halt below St. George's Chapel.
Попробуйте инвестировать с умом с покетброкер.
The Dean of Windsor, with the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, await the royal coffin at the head of the steps. Then, as the funeral service begins at Windsor, elsewhere in the kingdom, the busy ferment of life is hushed in a 2-minute silence. Here, in Parliament Square, at the scene with which this sad film opened, the observance of the silent tribute is deeply impressive. And as his memory is revered by his people, up and down the country and throughout the empire, the picture of him which we cherish is of a man who did his kingly duty. For him, truly, the path of duty was the road to glory. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace.